they were here before the Bible, before Egypt. Long before written history, the Sumerians spoke of gods who came from the stars. But these weren't just stories. According to the oldest known tablets ever discovered, beings called the Anunnaki descended from the sky. Their name literally means those who came from above. These weren't angels. They came in flying ships. They brought knowledge, power, and an agenda. Many believe they came from a hidden planet, Nibiru, one that only nears Earth every 3,600 years. And when it does, everything changes. The tablets claim the Anunnaki created mankind not out of love, but necessity. They mixed their own DNA with primitive hominids to create a worker species, us. Why? To mine gold, not for wealth, but to repair their dying atmosphere. These ancient texts speak of giants walking the earth, of divine rulers who passed down bloodlines that still control us today. It all sounds like myth, but here's the question. Why do these same stories appear in nearly every ancient culture, from Mesopotamia to Mesoamerica? If the Anunnaki were just legend, why does the entire world remember them?
There were these beings in the ancient Sumerian cuneiform tablets. Some of them call themselves the ordainers of destiny. They actually had the capability of foreseeing potential outcomes. They would see them on this crystal tablet, which is so bizarre, first of all. This is 6,000 years ago. When they found the outcome that they wanted to happen, they would then create action steps toward that particular outcome, nudging that outcome into reality, collapsing it into the reality tunnel, making it a part of this third dimension while they're alive and living on that timeline. So it's conscious thought multiplied by action equals manifestation. That's what the shirt is. DT multiplied by A equals M. That's the formula. And these ancients knew this a very long time ago. So there's been a scientific study, a genetic study on human beings, the differences between races of people. Now, growing up, I was taught that I'm black because my ancestors were out in the sun in Africa, and you're Caucasian because your ancestors were in the mountains of the Caucasus Mountains of Russia or whatever. But what I did find out, this science, check this out. They found out that there's a 2% variance between races of people. Now, it sounds like a small number when you say 2%. However, geneticists all say the same thing. They agree on the same thing. It would take millions more years of regular, standard, old-fashioned evolution for that genetic mutation to naturally occur. So they're calling this an artificial mutation. The fact that we're different races is because of an artificial mutation, and the 2% variance shouldn't even be there. Not in 200,000 years.
Sure.
It shouldn't be there. Now I'm going to get to my hypothesis, because that's what I do. I connect the dots. If you have a farm and you have cows on your farm, you brand your cows. Why do you do that? Because if your cow walks down the road, they go, that's Farmer Jen's cow. The Anunnaki, who ruled over different regions of the planet according to the ancient texts, not according to us. And if you notice that the people that they ruled over always looked like them, I think that they put a genetic brand on the people.
This is the most important mural that's ever been created in human history. It tells us everything. In this depiction, and I want to break it down, the two beings on the other end are the Anuna. That's why they have wings, and that's why the horns on their helmets have multiple horns that represent status. They're not kings, they're the beings that we think of as the Anuna, our creators. In this depiction, you're seeing our two Anuna on either side passing rulership, kingship, to rule over us, to two different individuals. One of them is a king, and one of them is a priest. Now notice those two beings with the wings, they're passing this, you see that? What they're passing is the symbol of the pine cone. And in their hand, they have the handbag. Remember Pillar 43 in Göbekli Tepe? It's got the same handbag symbol below it. The Anuna, they know all. They know everything in the universe. They are more powerful than we can ever understand. They seem to somehow be related to creation. They're passing the pine cone behind the head, pineal gland. They're passing the knowledge to the king and the priest for how to rule over humanity.
If you go back in history about 6,000 years, there was a major civilization. It was a tribal civilization. They were called the Sumerians. They lived between what's now Iraq, between the Tigris and Euphrates River, very fertile, vegetables, fruits, fish in the rivers. And they grew to probably, I'm speculating at the time, about 6,000 years ago, maybe about 150,000 people. Well, in a period of about maybe 100 years, this tribal civilization invented mathematics, astronomy, medicine, schools and education, writing, number systems, the wheel, machines, engineering, astronomy. They invented all this stuff within a matter of about 100 years. Well, obviously, this was knowledge that was given to them, I believe, with the best intentions by interdimensional beings. Now, I'm not making that up. I'm not speculating. That's not the 10% that I'm speculating. I know this for a fact because the Sumerians, everything they wrote, every building they built, everything they said, everything that comes back to us from 6,000 years ago is them thanking the gods. Inanna, Anu, which means Sky King, Enki, Enlil. They said, thank you for giving us all this knowledge and information. And they grew to be, within a 50 or 100 years, to be an extraordinary civilization. Large cities, paved roads, huge buildings, metropolises, they just grew out of nowhere. And so we know that this was knowledge from interdimensional beings. Now I speculate a little bit that the aliens got too involved in the culture, made themselves the king, just got carried away with the whole thing and started maybe to argue with each other, and that affected the humans on the third dimension. So I think they got too involved, and I think that society went off the track and probably lasted for another maybe 1,300 years, and then the Sumerians disappeared, and then what came next were the Babylonians. So learning from this lesson in Sumeria about getting too involved, about 800 years after they revealed themselves to the Sumerians, they found another civilization along the Nile River. This was the land of Kemet. Kemet the word means black land, and Kemites means people of the black land. They were, again, a peaceful tribal civilization. Well, when the aliens revealed themselves, I believe they revealed themselves to King Narmer in 3100 BC, united the two kingdoms, and from that moment in 3100 BC, for another 3,000 years, they were the biggest deal on the planet. They were by far the largest civilization, the most advanced civilization. And again, we see this giant leap in technology. Mathematics, astronomy, medicine, writing, schools, the whole 9 yards. But the aliens didn't insert themselves into the society or into the civilization. I believe that they stayed as advisors. And that's what they're going to do this time. They're not going to insert themselves in our politics or our problems. They're going to work with people who they're going to be able to communicate with and work with. So they're going to help us, but just like they did in Egypt. So in Egypt, now this civilization lasted for more than 3,000 years. Our country is literally blowing apart after 250, 270 years. So 3,000 years is a long time to be a stable, wealthy, abundant society. They took all this fourth and fifth dimensional teaching and they boiled it down to one principle. And that became the governing principle of Kemet for another 3,000 years. And that principle is Mat. So Mat is truth, or the way things are, or the flow, or the source. Very simply, Mat means being a good human, telling the truth, being kind, helping others, cooperating for the greater good. From king to commoner, Mat was the guiding principle, a constant reminder to keep all aspects of life aligned with the flow of creation, aligned with the vibration of source. The oldest book in existence, it was written 2,370 BC, so that's 4,400 years ago. This is the oldest existing book. It's called The Instructions of Ptah-hotep. Ptah-hotep was a senior advisor, the vizier, like the highest advisor of the pharaoh at that time. He wrote this book for his son, who was going to also be an advisor to the pharaoh, and he was giving him advice. Great is Mat, which means truth, laying a straight path. Never hath it been overthrown since the reign of Osiris. Then he says, overstepping Mat is abhorrent to the soul. Then he says, for the king hath bestowed upon me favors more than my forefathers. This because I worked on behalf of truth and justice for the king unto mine old age. Mat wasn't just a teaching in a book. Honoring source was the essence of their government and their society. I'm also going to tell you, again, more evidence of the central importance of Mat, or source, in Kemite society. The Great Pyramid of Khufu, which was built 2600 BC. The Great Pyramid of Khufu, if you go down through the secret tunnels all the way down, a half a mile under the pyramid, there's something called the King's Chamber. And every new king or prince was taken through this secret thing and brought into the King's Chamber. Before you get into the King's Chamber, there's an inscription on the wall, and it says, Ma'at is good and everlasting. It has not been disturbed since the day of its creator. He who abides by its principles knows peace. He who transgresses its ordinances is punished. It is true that evil and wrongdoing may gain wealth in this world, but the power of Ma'at is everlasting and absolute. I share this with you to tell you that that's what the aliens are going to teach us. I call interdimensional beings, aliens, whatever word. They're going to teach us about source. They're going to teach us about Ma'at. They're going to show us how to rise to higher dimensions through the embracing or the anchoring of Ma'at, source, life. In China, they call it the Tao. The Tao cannot be named, it cannot be seen, it's infinite, and it can't be violated. In tantric literature, they call it Shiva. In Vedic literature, they call it Brahman, the source. And that's our goal. That's the goal of every human being, is to realize that we are a pure expression, a pure manifestation of source.